Gumbald spared no expense at building his kingdom, and the speed at which he managed to achieve so much construction is a worthy feat. The great uncle must have hired some really great contractors, because back in Always Bemo Closing, the ziggurat that Gumbald would co-opt into his primary castle still looked like this. Now, behold! A new glazed look in the shape of a cake, with a newly minted city around it. We don't know the exact amount of time that passed since Always Bemo Closing, but I doubt it was more than half a year. It was probably far less than that. The gap of time between Jake being abducted and retrieved was 5 weeks, and that was likely the largest singular gap of time that elapsed between events. Anyhow, Gumbald is racing along to challenge Princess Bubblegum's establishment, and she's not having any of it. Likely not comfortable with entrusting anybody else to handle the recon mission, she goes on it herself, though choosing Starchy as a partner may have been somewhat questionable, but he managed to put in good work. The photos turned out well. It was an amusing gag to have PB choose to go retro for her recon and use film when she definitely has access to a variety of digital surveillance equipment. The follow-up comedy of seeing her developing the photos in a darkroom was a great extension to the joke, but perhaps there was more to it than PB simply being quirky and sometimes doing things the non-optimal way. Maybe Gumbald actually has some sort of barrier around his kingdom that disables incoming digital technology, forcing Bonnie to go old school for her recon. But that is just random hypothesizing on my part. It honestly could have simply been done for fun and laughs. While everyone in the Candy Kingdom prepares for war, and the morally questionable Colonel Candycorn is nearly ecstatic that he gets to participate in another war before he kicks the bucket, Finn is adopting a pacifistic outlook and tries his hand at diplomacy by going to Gumbald directly to plead for an alternative to war. Finn does not merely break away from his usual sword-slinging ways, he's also able to consciously recognize that he's acting in a different manner compared to his younger self.
I used to be all about violence. Now it's like, I'm different.
You're a beautiful flower and I love to watch you grow.
Don't we all, Jake? Don't we all? Finn's transition to being more thoughtful and contemplative on the reason for violence is a relatively recent shift in his personality. One obvious, and likely most prominent reason for the shift is Fern. Not only did Finn have a period of time where he was trying to help Fern overcome problems without simply resorting to violence.
Okay, Fern, what do you think we should do next?
Sever his tendons?
Finn, of course, also had to deal with the trauma of, presumably at the time, killing Fern. Finn witnessed that even somebody like himself, heck, literally himself, could, through circumstances beyond their control, become corrupted and carry out evil actions. I think a large reason as to why Finn had a period of time where he couldn't deal killing blows was because he realized that people trying to be good can still become bad, but therefore the opposite also applies. Beings of pure evil excluded, there's potential for individuals to change. Hell, even a being of pure evil, through certain circumstances, was able to change into somebody who chooses to reject and fight the evil. Besides the experiences with Fern and Sweet Pea, Finn also witnessed the Candy Kingdom in a state of war during the Elements miniseries when the Fire Nation attacked. No, the other Fire Nation. But yeah, that probably wasn't that great of an experience for him. During that war, Finn himself was burning with white-hot rage for bloodshed and combat, and experiencing an anger-fueled elemental overdrive like that may have also made Finn more hesitant to mindlessly hack and slash away at his problems in the future. And going back even further to the Islands miniseries, Finn managed to persuade his mother and get her to change her mind without resorting to any sort of violence. I wonder, if Finn's mother had turned out to be another parental figure that disappointed, to the point where Finn ended up having to rely on violence to stop her, would we still end up with a Finn who contemplates on the pacifist approach in the here and now? I feel like it's quite possible we wouldn't. Finn's mother was a good person with arguably misguided views, and meeting her allowed Finn to learn from the experience. At the end of my Islands mega review, I raised the question of whether Finn changed due to the events in Islands, as I was somewhat unsure at the time. But looking back now, I can unequivocally say that the events in Islands were among many things that helped broaden Finn's perspective and allowed him to see the world with more nuance than before. I think this is all pretty cool. Finn's development over the past few seasons can't be traced to just one singular event, but rather a large amount of events that cumulatively make him a more rounded character. Despite Finn's newfound diplomatic ways, he still does get his jimmies rustled at the sight of Fern.
Fern. Cuteness offensive.
By Fern pompously having to claim his superiority to Finn, he's actually still very much demonstrating that he does still have a deeply ingrained inferiority complex that's very much active. Making Finn's 17th birthday his worst ever was still not enough to make Fern feel genuinely happy. No surprise there. I love how despite the beef and all the issues Fern has, he's still able to acknowledge that Finn's new sword is cool.
Cool sword.
What was an even better moment, though, was Jake putting the cuteness offensive temporarily on hold to non-verbally prove a point.
There's nothing you have that I don't.
Bark, 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 bark.
That's such a wonderful moment. Jake illustrating with great comedic timing that Fern lacks somebody close to him who loves him and will protect him. Fern does not have a Jake equivalent. More so, Finn is surrounded with many friends who care deeply for him, while it doesn't seem like the Gumbald crew cares that much for Fern beyond how they can use him. And Aunt Lolly soon demonstrates PB's created relatives are very much into using people to achieve their goals. Manipulation seems to be a trait they all share. We obviously know Gumbald does it, we saw Chicle do it in Marcy and Hunson, and in this episode, Aunt Lolly connives a scheme under the guise of being a good-hearted person. Which, of course, these traits all do stem from Princess Bubblegum herself, who's done many questionable things throughout the series, but are on hyperdrive in the Gumbald crew. The plan Aunt Lolly came up with starts with Gumbald having a fake change of heart that's sincere enough to fool Finn, and this was enacted by having Finn save Gumbald's life. I'm really curious what the contingency plan was if Finn chose not to save Gumbald or failed to, because unless Gumbald has rocket shoes or something, it really seems like he was just gonna splat onto the floor below. Though granted, given that this is a cartoon and Gumbald is made of gum, that might be a recoverable injury. The shot of Fern sulking back into the shadows as Finn and Gumbald laugh it up seemed foreboding at the time, but maybe Fern was supposed to be the backup plan to save Gumbald from falling to death? When first watching this episode, at this point I was wondering whether Fern was made aware that Finn was being taken for a spin, or did Fern genuinely think that the rulers of the kingdom he now serves allegiance to were warming up to the person he already feels inferior to? But since Fern is at the meeting at the end when Gumbald declares Gum War, I doubt he's out of the know, so perhaps he was indeed simply lurking around to make sure Gumbald doesn't splat into the floor. Regardless of what the backup plan was or wasn't, it appears that Aunt Lolly and Uncle Gumbald both have a very accurate read on Finn's kind-hearted nature and the exact sort of person he is. They had a lot of faith in Finn coming to the rescue and, quote-unquote, doing the right thing, which enabled them to manipulate him so easily. Although Lolly, Chicle, and Gumbald were having such a grand old time at dinner that I wasn't even sure if they were acting at this point, they may have just been legitimately enjoying Finn's company while still planning to use him. After Finn tells a story that references the events in the episode Jake's Suit.
This is my first ever girlfriend. I really want her to like me.
So then I made him do a diaper baby dance.
I'm a certain baby that can take like a man. I can shake him off, Fanny, I can shake him a kid. I'm a tough certain baby that can punch in your buns. Punch in your buns. I can punch out your buns. If you're an evil witch, I will punch you for fun.
The Gumbald crew finally puts their plan into action. They douse Finn with a so-called celebration bucket that is actually full of dum-dum juice.
Be sure to give Bonnie a big hug from me when you tell her.
The plan was to dispose of Princess Bubblegum in the same manner Gumbald tried like 800 years ago, by turning her docile and simple-minded. The plan almost slips up when Jake gets some of the solution onto Chicle though, who turns back into Crunchy, and now we have our answer as to why the land of Ooh 1000 years in the future, as we saw in the episode Grable's 1000 Plus, had Crunchy within a capsule inside a gigantic toy vending machine guardian. By the way, if your memory is hazy in regards to Grable's 1000 Plus, you should really watch that episode again before the Adventure Time finale airs. That episode contains Ooh's future, and in the finale we'll likely witness the events that led to such a future. So yeah, rewatch Grable's 1000 Plus if you haven't done so in a while. The Dum Dum Juice plan version 2.0 does end up failing though, because PB notices Finn and Jake are glistening, which halts her hug, and Peppermint Butler ends up being exposed to the solution instead. Which, like, oh my glob, did we just lose Peppermint Butler? Chicle apparently does not revert back again and remains as crunchy, so is the amazing, awesome character that is Pep-Butt doomed to stay baby-esque? Perhaps not, as some promo material Cartoon Network released on Twitter for the series finale had a non-Dum-Dum Peppermint Butler in it, so maybe Princess Bubblegum found a way to revert him before the war got into full swing. We'll have to find out when the finale airs, but personally, I do hope the promo material is erroneous, and that Peps remains as a victim in the crossfire of the family feud. Peps being the trigger that sends Princess Bubblegum beyond the point of no return just works too well, as he's been not just her loyal servant and faithful companion, but also one of her closest friends. As much as I love Pep-Butt, I think he shouldn't revert back, because it ruins the severity of this situation. Finn is of course pretty devastated, as not only did his carelessness lead to Pep-Butt's transformation, but he also moved the war even further ahead of schedule. Finn's particular actions may have even been the ones to render the war entirely inevitable.
I donked up.
And it was only mere moments beforehand that Finn was excited and jubilant over being able to handle conflicts in what he saw as a more mature way.
As I get older, I see the most important thing is to empathize with my friends and enemies. Like, coexist instead of cutting off people's heads and stuff.
While this is indeed a very important trait to have, this is of course not always viable, depending on context, and I'm curious to see what mental hoops Finn will be jumping through as the war continues to initiate. This made me think all the way back to the Season 1 episode, His Hero, where Finn learned the moral that violence done to protect somebody is good, actually. Well, maybe, sometimes, according to old ladies at least, which themselves tell you that they shouldn't be listened to. This episode purposefully tripped over its own points because, again, things are rarely black and white, and context and nuance matter, but back then, Finn was a young and impressionable 12-year-old and simply needed reassurance that slaying evil was acceptable. Back then, things seemed clear to a simple-minded and idealistic young Finn, although the episode itself made it abundantly clear to the audience that reality tends to be much more complicated. And in Gumbaldia, Finn is now facing that complexity. The 17-year-old Finn of the present, of course, is still very aware that violence can save people, but he's having a hard time figuring out when violence should be applied. His ideology of empathy first obviously has an expiration point, and Finn is unsure when the line has to be crossed into violence. Princess Bubblegum has already crossed the line and does not intend to ever look back, and now Finn will have to make the personal decision of where to draw the line for himself. Finn appears steadfast in his empathy-first ideology, but he also nearly led to the downfall of the Candy Kingdom when he tried to do a solo diplomacy mission, and the only reason Bonnie didn't take the blow is because Peppermint Butler took it in her place. So the eagerness to apply a freshly realized ideology is at war with the guilt Finn should be feeling over donking things up this bad. Suffice to say, there's a lot going on here, and I hope Finn's development in the finale remains interesting, and I'm looking forward to what choices he ends up making. So the squirrel that hates Jake and often serves as a spy to events occurring in the Candy Kingdom returns to Gumbaldia to give the update that the quote-unquote peaceful attempt to get rid of Bonnibel Bubblegum had failed. This scene may have been a bit of a small storyboarding snafu, as Fern commands the squirrel to enter the castle, only then for us to see Fern already in a chair before the squirrel arrives in the room. Alternatively, Fern told the squirrel to move on ahead, and then afterward ran through the castle at a faster pace and arrived in the meeting room before the squirrel. Which is rather comical to think about, I guess, but it was probably a simple storyboarding snafu. Gumbaldia ends with Gumbald announcing the VIPs on his side of the Gum War.
My formidable legion of Candy Kingdom haters.
So I guess let's just give a brief reminder on these chumps before this review comes to a close.
Ricardio.
We haven't seen him in person since all the way back in Lady and Peebles. He was in the end credits of the guest-directed episode Water Park Prank. He was on the wall of people banned from the water park in that episode, so I guess he's just been causing minor trouble in OO this whole time. Him being a Candy Kingdom hater makes absolute sense, and he would love to get revenge. He's probably the most obvious choice for Gumbald's army.
Bandit Princess.
I'm surprised Bandit Princess would be willing to play with others, but I guess for enough coin, she's willing to cooperate. I doubt she's specifically a Candy Kingdom hater, but is simply willing to hate any kingdom for the right circumstances or at the right price. I wonder how Fern feels about BP joining Gumbald's forces. She's the reason he's green, after all, although without her actions, he would still be Finn trapped as a sword. I'd imagine Fern would have some conflicted feelings about working alongside this character.
Samantha the Warrior Doll.
So she's from the episode The Pit and had a thing for Jake, and as far as we know, she had no relation to the Candy Kingdom of any kind, and her reasons for joining Gumbald's army are the most unclear since her backstory is also pretty much unknown. A really weird choice for a callback character. I wonder what's up with that.
Peacemaster.
He was the star of the episode Nemesis, and back then already had a grudge against the Candy Kingdom due to the heavy-duty surveillance on its citizens that it engaged in. Peppermint Butler turning Peacemaster's children into monsters at the end of the episode would only further fuel his rage. Peacemaster siding with Gumbald makes absolute sense, and honestly, you can't really blame the guy for it, especially if perhaps Gumbald promised to return Peacemaster's children to normal as payment.
Meow.
An assassin who was stopped by Finn and Jake when she tried to assassinate Wildberry Princess in the episode Jake vs. Meow. In Angel Face, Meow was human-sized, and that appearance remained into the present, which suggests that perhaps her tiny form in Jake vs. Meow was a temporary shrinking transformation of some kind. Maybe she got a wizard to shrink her for that assassination attempt or something. Meow was seen candified during elements, implying all prisoners were released after the elementification took place in Oo, and she likely ran free when everything was fixed. Meow should have a big grudge against Finn and Jake, plus she was kept in a Candy Kingdom prison facility, so joining Gumbald's army is quite on point for her.
Pete Sassafras.
Okay, wow, what a pull. He was in the episode Candy Streets, where Finn and Jake threw him in the dungeon because they erroneously thought he was the one who robbed LSP. Presumably, they forgot about him, and the justice system in the Candy Kingdom completely failed him via sheer negligence, so now he's on Gumbald's side for revenge. What a callback. I would assume most people probably don't even remember who he is.
Ash the Warlock.
He's made a couple of cameos over time, so I'm sure nobody forgot Marceline's douchebag of an ex-boyfriend who first appeared in Memory of a Memory. Last time we saw him, Simon had stolen his flying carpet in the episode Betty. I don't think he has a grudge against the Candy Kingdom unless you undergo some mental gymnastics of the sapphic variety. But hey, who knows?
Sir Slicer.
Yo, calling back a real oldie here, all the way from Season 2. In the episode Blood Under the Skin, Sir Slicer relentlessly taunted Finn for his lack of armor, and then was made a fool of by the episode's end, so I guess he has kind of a grudge on Finn and Jake, though not necessarily the Candy Kingdom, so his presence kinda makes sense. Unless he got seriously buff and is able to actually move in his armor, I don't really see Sir Slicer putting up much of a fight.
Scorcher.
Another oldie, this time from the Season 3 episode, Hitman. Ice King hired Scorcher to hit Finn and Jake, not realizing he was setting up their murder. He's got some pretty cool fire skills, so I'm eager to see him in action again. And as far as his commitment to Gumbald goes, well, he's a contract hire. He simply works for the money as per contract. Pretty straightforward, his presence makes a lot of sense.
The Green Knight.
I realize I've been calling him Fern throughout this entire review, but yeah, he's going by the Green Knight now, and I should probably have used that name instead. But anyway, whatever. I don't think any further comment is needed on the old Green Knight here. We all know who he is.
And finally, the Iced King.
I think I might be here by mistake. But what are we doing again?
Oh, good old war-hungry Gunter. Yeah, this was an amusing final addition to Gumbald's army. I laughed quite hard. So get ready for Gum War, everyone. Get ready for a 4-part finale that will conclude Adventure Time forever. Well, hopefully. I know the series didn't quite get its optimal duration of being on air, but I'd rather go without a continuation or reboot in the future. Just let Adventure Time end for good.
No, you're right. Can't be nostalgic.
Gumbaldia sets up the Gum War pretty damn well, and I had fun with this episode. The finale has to tackle both Gulb and the Gum War, and in my opinion, a whole lot rests on whether these two events can be intertwined with each other in an interesting manner. Fingers crossed, the finale of Adventure Time will be a grand old time. As for what my plans for this channel are after Adventure Time concludes, I'll have a brief channel update video on that topic pretty soon. But spoilers, I'll still continue to do videos about Adventure Time, because there's still an endless amount of stuff to talk about. Alright, thanks for tuning in, everyone. If you'd like, follow me on Twitter. If you want to hang with me while I stream video games, follow me on Twitch. And if you really love my content and want to support this channel, support me on Patreon. Thank you very much, and see ya next time.